They're finally breaking on Iran. They're going back to their districts this summer, and they're hearing about how unpopular this war is because it is unauthorized. I would argue it's unconstitutional, but it's so deeply unpopular across every political background. And now it's expanding. Hey guys, I am wrapping up a big week in Alabama, as anybody should, at Dairy Queen. Welcome back to Independent Americans. It's been a big week. It's been a wild week. There's been a lot in the news. Everything from my conversation with Governor J.B. Pritzker talking about the Bears and open primaries and Trump calling them names, to my conversation with Todd, who is now running neck and neck with Jim Risch as an independent in Idaho, to the Iran war, to Mamdani getting protested for coming to 9/11 events next month. A whole lot of stuff's happening. But August is here. Thank you for sticking with us. I've got a special media summary episode of Independent Americans. I was all over the TV this week because there was a lot to talk about. But here it is, a special weekend episode of Independent Americans. Please continue to subscribe, give us all the stars, and share. Thank you for sticking with us. Our independent movement is growing. This show is growing every single episode. If you like what you hear, pass it along to a couple friends, like you would Blizzard at Dairy Queen. But I got to tell you, my favorite, Snickers Blizzard. Nothing beats a Snickers Blizzard. I'm going to eat mine. Here is your special episode from this week of my media clips, special Independent Americans. Stay vigilant. And next time I'll be coming to you from New York. But thank you to Alabama. Thank you to Space City. Thank you, Huntsville. Thank you, Trash Pandas. It's a big week down here. My boys are done with space camp. They're eating DQ and going to sleep for 2 weeks. Have a great weekend. Stay vigilant. Get yourself a Blizzard.
Fears of a wider war in Iran are growing today as the United States and Saudi Arabia attacked Iranian proxies after a pause in fighting. New York Times is reporting this, quote, American and Saudi fighter jets attacked Iranian-linked militias in Iraq on Tuesday, and Iran fired missiles at military bases in Jordan and oil tankers. The latest strikes further widened the war in the Middle East, drawing Iran-allied groups in Iraq and Yemen and potentially Lebanon into the fighting. Their involvement raised the question of whether Iran could be encouraging its proxies to open additional fronts in a war that threatens to embroil more countries in the region. Donald Trump shows zero signs of A, caring, or B, trying to quell the growing escalation, telling Fox News this, quote, we're going to beat the effing S out of them. We'll be hitting them hard. They're going to get a beating, end quote. Trump also said that Iran's attack on a military base in Jordan came as a complete surprise. The question remains how much longer the Republican Party will allow Trump and his administration to continue to operate and escalate this war without oversight from Congress. Let's bring into our coverage Margaret Donovan. She served in the U.S. Army and was a captain in the JAG Corps. Also joining us, Paul Rieckhoff. He's the host of the Independent Americans podcast and the founder and CEO of Independent Veterans of America. Margaret, the only thing that I'm sure polls worse than the war in Iran, which is currently polling at a 62% disapproval from the American people, is a widening war in the Middle East involving more countries.
Yeah, I think one of the most fascinating things about what you just said, Nicole, is that this is the president just sort of musing as to whether or not he's going to expand the war. And I think this is just an important point to remember. And I know I beat this drum a lot and it's worth beating again. War is not meant to be started in the United States by a single person. On February 28th, the entire country woke up and learned that one man took us into war. That scenario is precisely what the framers wanted to avoid when they wrote the Constitution. They vested war powers. It is shared in between the legislative branch and the executive branch, but they specifically vested the power to declare war. And that verb, declare, that was actually discussed at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. What verb should we use when we're talking about the power to start a war under our new republic? And they settled on declare specifically because they realized that war, as we're seeing, is a runaway train. It can cost you resources, it will cost you lives, and it is completely out of your control once it has begun. And so that is why in Article 1 of the Constitution, the power to declare a war vests with Congress, also the power to fund the military. Article 2 puts, of course, the president as the commander-in-chief once we're there. But that allocation of powers in the Constitution reflects exactly the perils of when one person brings us into war. And I think that the war powers votes that we're seeing going on right now is an embodiment of we the people speaking for what they will and will not stand for through their elected representatives.
But they will not abide. I mean, Paul, you always ask, what are they doing about it? All Democrats, or almost all Democrats, are voting to stop this. And the news seems to be that increasingly Republicans are joining them.
Yes, because it's getting worse. I've called it a sucking chest wound, and it just keeps pulling in more and more resources, everything from our military resources to our economic strength to the lives of our sons and daughters to now Trump's polls. I mean, he's at historic lows, I think around 35%, which is as low as he was around January 6th. And among independents, it's 24%. So that's a massive alarm bell for Republicans, which I think is starting to move Senate Republicans. They're finally standing up to him. They're finally breaking on Iran. They're going back to their districts this summer, and they're hearing about how unpopular this war is because it is unauthorized. I would argue it's unconstitutional, but it's so deeply unpopular across every political background. And now it's expanding. The Saudis are getting involved. The Egyptians are getting involved, and it's beyond our control. That's why I think the Saudis cut that nuke deal last week, because they want an insurance if Trump and America have to pull out, because we know America doesn't have the stomach for long, protracted wars, but our presidents keep getting us into them.
Let me show you what Lindsey Graham said in footage that the Wall Street Journal obtained about how we got into the war in Iran.
He said, best thing I've ever done. He loves blowing stuff up. So, there are a lot of people inside didn't want to do it. So I've had my challenges. But President Trump, when he gets into the zone, he listens, asks good questions, no tweeting. He has done nothing. He hasn't tweeted much at all. No drama. He's been a great wartime president. I said last night that Trump and Bibi are like Roosevelt and Churchill. I mean, they're the right two guys to confront this evil.
Again, the late Senator Lindsey Graham is free to his opinions and to sharing them, but the American people do not agree with that assessment. Just 33% approve of the war, and as Paul Rieckhoff said, the numbers among independents and Democrats are dramatically lower than that.
Yeah, I mean, that's surprising. Lindsey Graham, of course, is a former JAG officer. And I know many people that worked with him and found him very enjoyable to work with and had very nice things to say about him. But the fact of the matter is that when you go to war, it costs you things. It costs you lives. It costs you resources. And we are going to see the effects of that for, years to come, if not generations to come, in terms of our stockpile reductions. And there are Americans who are no longer with us because of what we've started. So, one more point I'd like to make. I hear a lot of chatter about, you're not supporting the troops if you're not supporting this war. As a two-time combat veteran, it is not supporting the troops to demand that there's a coherent plan. You are supporting the troops by saying that you don't want them sent aimlessly into a battle at a dangerous place without a thought-out plan for how you're going to use them and use that precious resource. So, I just certainly hope that the people are able to speak again through their elected representatives to stop this.
How does it land when a president is so erratic in their public statements?
Well, it is certainly not good for stability. And you can imagine how much that might undermine our authority to our enemies abroad. But I think speaking to people in the service, I think for the most part, people who are on the ground still wearing the uniform, they are looking to their leaders within. And so there is some amount of blocking out politics in general when you're serving, particularly when you're serving overseas. So you just hope that there are enough good leaders left in the military to properly lead those still in uniform.
Margaret, thank you for being here, being part of this conversation. Paul sticks around for something really special and important to both of us when we come back, remembering Yeoman Wilder. He's a beloved faith What did the bystanders do?
They were, I'm a New Yorker bone and bone, and we're tough people here, but I saw cowards. And I hate to say that as somebody who loves the city.
It's okay. They're kids. Yeah. Tell me, what did you want to see and what disappointed you?
Obeying to authoritarianism, to authority that was out of line, pissing on the Constitution. And they came off like, I don't care. I don't care.
A little over a year ago, we introduced you to that man. That is New York City baseball coach, local legend Yeoman Wilder. We met Yeoman after he protected some of his baseball players and informed them of their constitutional rights when ICE agents showed up at their practice and attempted to ask his players where they were from and where their parents were from. So we're terribly sad to tell you today that Yeoman Wilder passed away earlier this month. Yeoman founded the Harlem Youth Baseball Academy, which for more than 2 decades developed young baseball players both on and off the field in the New York City area. Yeoman Wilder is responsible for helping more than 400 young men earn college baseball scholarships, including developing multiple Major League Baseball players. His family describes him like this, quote, Yeoman stood up against injustice and was a beloved brother, uncle, and brother-in-law to many. His family extended throughout the neighborhood, and his impact was felt far and wide. He was the glue that kept our family together and was always there to help any of us when he could. With Yeoman's death, the baseball community has lost an iconic and now famous coach and mentor, and this country has lost a patriot who used America's pastime to show what this country looks like at its best. For me, Yeoman was the first person, Paul, who I saw do something that the powerful people refused to do in that first year of Trump's presidency. Yeoman stood up against ICE when law firms were capitulating basically by the day, when universities were cutting deals basically by the week, when Republicans were falling in line behind military troops in the streets of American cities, behind ICE raids that were sweeping up American citizens, behind detentions of young children at the Dilley Detention Center. And Yeoman Wilder stood up to ICE.
Yeah, Coach Yeoman Wilder was a hero, and he led by example. He showed what courage and integrity and community and real patriotism is all about. He's a legend in New York City in the baseball community, and now his legend will grow around the country and I hope around the world. As you know, my kids both play baseball in New York City, and it's a small community, and every baseball community was worried and continues to be worried about ICE threats and something like this happening. But Coach Yeoman Wilder stepped up. And he showed his players what real leadership is all about. And he built not just a generation of baseball players, but a generation of leaders who can follow his example, who can lead heroically, who can meet this moment. And I think that's going to be his legacy, is so many young men and women who are inspired by his example. We're going to step up because we're going to need more leaders in the days ahead. Mr. Rogers used to always say, look for the helpers. Coach Yeoman Wilder is an example of one of those helpers that ran in when others were running out.
I think he also highlighted in that interview 2 things. One, how most people weren't doing that. Like, these were kids, right? These were kids at practice. And he described New Yorkers, who he said were tough people, as being, the most generous, I guess, explanation is they were too afraid to do anything. And I think he forced people to answer the question, what would you do? And I wonder if you had that reaction to him.
I did. He was like a thunderbolt of courage and conscience in a time when we needed it. And that's why it went viral, because he was so real and so true. And, you know, I've had this conversation with the coaching community and all the sports my kids play in basketball and football, and they've had to run scenarios. What do we do if ice comes? That's actually a scenario that sports programs have to think about, especially at a time when there are so many migrant kids who come to sports for community, for stability, for leadership, for safety. A lot of these programs provide vital childcare. And when ICE started targeting kids, they needed someone to step up. And Coach Yeoman was like a real life superhero. And I hope the mayor recognizes him, the governor recognizes him, the president should, because he's the kind of leader we need to amplify and show as an example. Our young men, especially in this country, I think, are really starving for leadership that they can follow and they can look up to. And Coach Yeoman Wilder is that kind of leader that we want our kids to look like and be like.
I also think Yeoman is sort of a test for who has courage in this moment. I mean, Major League Baseball should wrap their arms around Yeoman Wilder and support his program and support his players as well.
Yeah, there it is. It's out there. Come on, Major League Baseball, Yankees, Mets, everybody in the tri-state area, especially. This is a man whose legacy will inspire generations. We all have to do all we can to amplify it, and remember that, you know, this is still the environment our kids are living in, and we've got to protect our kids first, and that starts by showing courage in that moment and meeting the moment. And there'll be other moments that'll come, and if you need some guts and you need some inspiration, think about Coach Yeoman Wilder.
Paul Rieckhoff, thank you for sticking around for this conversation. One more break. We'll be right back.
This episode of Independent Americans is sponsored by Kalshi. We make predictions every single day. We talk about it on this show: politics, pop culture, the economy, the biggest stories making headlines all across America and around the world. Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, lets you trade those predictions in a live market. If you haven't checked it out, now is the time, especially around politics and the elections. Will Trump buy at least part of Greenland? If you think he'll do that before 2027 and you wager $100, it'll pay out $2,019.24. If you think it's going to be before January 20th, 2029, it's 17%. You can also pick whether or not you think the Republicans or the Democrats are going to win Congress. You can pick who you think the Democratic nominee will be, who the Republican nominee. It would be great to see if there's an independent nominee. There's a lot that you can wager on, but on Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. It's fun. And if you listen to this show, you can stay ahead of the curve. So download the Kalshi app and use the code INDEPENDENT and get up to $500 in bonus credits when you trade 25, which is pretty good. Kalshi, 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 trade on anything. 18 and older, restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see Kalshi.com/regulatory. Independent Americans, now is the time. Check out Kalshi.
Everyone's here with me now. So Gretchen, John Cornyn, okay, there were so many times when he would go along with Trump, and now he's saying, you know, have you noticed? Have you noticed that I feel a freedom? Do you think he'll hold firm?
I do. I actually do. First of all, we've learned that people's word cannot be trusted, because the first thing that should be fire alarms for everyone is Todd Blanche said under oath that it was dead, but it's apparently not, because he won't sign the papers. Number two, this is John Cornyn unleashed. Okay. John Cornyn believes that the slush fund is wrong. And there's no way in hell Grassley is calling this vote tomorrow if John Cornyn is a no. I've been before this Senate committee. They're not going to call a vote unless John Cornyn is a yes. And by the way, Tom Tillis is not completely a yes set either. But what's more upsetting to me than even talking about the slush fund is, why are any of these senators saying it's okay to approve Todd Blanche simply because of the Epstein files? Like, suddenly that's all okay now, the way that he handled that? This should be concerning to every
among many
senator.
Things. The visit to Ghislaine Maxwell in the prison when she was suddenly moved, and the fact that half the documents still haven't been put out when they said they were going to put them all out. I mean,
exactly.
Ryan, what does it say to you? Again, I guess back to the point of somebody being good for their word, which now we live in a world where it sadly matters much less than it used to. But you go under oath, you say it's dead, then it may not be dead, and now you won't sign the paper. What does it say that he won't sign the paper?
It's astonishing. And the same thing has actually occurred not just in the Senate, but also in the courts. So a federal judge said to Todd Blanche and the Justice Department, give me in writing what you committed to in Congress. They said, no, his word in Congress should stand, which is just unbelievable. Why wouldn't you just put it in writing? The court is asking for that to guarantee that the case is truly over, and then the court can dismiss the case. And that's even putting himself and the Justice Department at risk, because it's a judge who might sanction them for their behavior in the case that created the slush fund in the first place, yet he won't do it. So there's something that's really hanging them up, even as Senator Cornyn said, it should be an easy ask.
It should, because they said under oath, he said under oath that it was dead, right? I mean, I'm just saying, hey, all you got to do is say that you said what you said, right? I mean, Paul, it does come, though, in the form of John Cornyn, who maybe whatever it was, I say 41 days ago, you might not have expected him to be the face of this. But let me just play some more of the very defiant messages that Cornyn is unafraid to send the White House today.
Maybe they think I'm just going to give up or, go along, but they're mistaken.
Why do you think they're not getting a message from you?
Maybe they think they can roll me.
Can they roll you?
No.
Do you think we'd be in this situation if Cornyn had won the primary and was running for the Senate seat instead of Ken Paxton in Texas?
I hope we would be, because integrity should still matter. And hooray for John Cornyn, right? Look what it's like to have a senator who's truly independent, who's willing to buck the president, who's willing to buck his own party, and a Republican senator at that. It would be great maybe if all senators could vote like they didn't have to run for re-election. We'd have a totally different situation where people put integrity and honor and our national security ahead of all the other stuff. And this weaponization fund is so deeply unpopular that, to Gretchen's point, I'm surprised more Republicans haven't broken with him on this, and Epstein similarly, because the Republicans are in real trouble here as they continue to align with Trump, as his popularity continues to plummet, especially with independents. I think it's at like 22% right now. But we need people who are willing to stand up and also send a message that you cannot pay people for attacking the government, which is what this weaponization fund is. It's not just about paying folks for what they've done. It's about giving people incentive for what they might do in the election upcoming. It's always about the circuit breaker of our from elections that Trump is trying to slow down, stop, meddle with, because he knows that's the check on his power that could be looming.
So, Ryan, let's just play this out. Okay, there could be a vote and Cornyn caves and there's a vote tomorrow and there's, some dancing that goes on. But if there isn't, okay, if this vote, the committee vote is delayed and the confirmation hearing on the floor goes all the way into the fall, right? We're talking about now, maybe second week of September, if everything goes well in that case. But Blanche is acting Attorney General right now. So what does that actually mean in practice if this is delayed?
So I do know that there are some Senate Republicans who think it doesn't really matter if they confirm him because he'll otherwise be an acting Attorney General or the confirmed Attorney General. But it is very different if you're an acting Attorney General. You don't have the same gravitas when their exchanges with the other agencies, and especially with the courts as well, as being Senate confirmed. And I think not only would he be an acting Attorney General, but he'd be an acting Attorney General who's not able to get through the Senate. Which is a very different calculation. And I think that's important before the judge.
Which really makes you look weak, I guess.
Makes you look weak, and it doesn't have the trust of the Senate behind it. And if the Senate is behind it, then he actually has congressional endorsement, I would say, for everything that he's been doing. So the Republicans are lining up behind what Blanche has been doing with the Justice Department if they do confirm him. And that's a very different scenario. Also, between now and the fall, there are some court cases that bear down directly on him. Tomorrow, there is a court case in the Epstein Transparency Act in which the judge has already said that Blanche acted in defiance of the Transparency Act. And tomorrow, they're supposed to give the judge the unredacted files that have been asked for. And then there are other cases in D.C. Circuit for the criminal contempt. The criminal contempt and the whole thing about sending people to El Salvador, it's Todd Blanche who's like person number one that has liability there. That's overhanging. Maybe something there happens before the fall.
It's interesting, Gretchen. This has now come down to the fund when it comes to Cornyn, right? So you're either going to make this fund go away or you don't have my vote. But before there was the fund issue, right? It was there, but before it was the main issue, the actual issue was meeting with the Epstein survivors, right? They had asked Blanche to do that, especially in the context of the meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell that resulted in her being moved to that minimum security prison in an unprecedented way. Okay. But so finally, then he met with the Epstein survivors after that last meeting when there was like this or not. And he does a quick meeting with them. They've now spoken out, said he behaved with no integrity during that meeting. It was Senator Tillis who had said, you don't have my vote unless you do that. Here's what some of the Epstein survivors are saying now about Blanche in the meeting.
The meeting was very condescending. I mean, he actually said the words, get to the point to us. We're survivors who've been waiting to meet with him for 9 months, 8 months. We've been asking for meetings. And he very much said, can you get to the point already? It's like, what are you getting at, right?
Our viewers know Danielle Bensky because she has been indefatigable in speaking out on this issue. So why are we not hearing Senator Tillis, who is not afraid of speaking out to Trump, continue to pound the table on this?
He's not. I was very disappointed that he simply made that request, like, Blanche, meet with them and then you'll get my vote. Although he's still waiting on the slush fund too, I think. But with regard to Epstein, that was very disappointing to me because shouldn't Todd Blanche have thought on his own to have a meeting a long time ago with the Epstein survivors? He didn't think of it on his own. And then when he thought that...
Well, I mean, he did. They'd been asking and he refused until Tillis said, do it or you don't have my vote. I mean, it couldn't be more obvious.
It couldn't be more obvious. And then he apparently wasn't even nice in the particular meeting that he was basically told to have. It brings me back to what I was saying earlier, is why is everyone else who's going to give a yes vote okay with how the Epstein files were handled? I think, though, to Ryan's point, what's really interesting is the slush fund must be more important than all of those other court cases you talked about in Trump's mind. Because this is what he is saying that he will not sign off on tonight. It has to be coming from Trump.
Right. That's the person who ultimately controls this. You know, Paul, in this issue where Trump wants this vote and he's not getting it from the Senate, he gets asked about the majority leader in the Senate, right? John Thune, who has done all these, things for Trump, gotten things over the finish line. So Trump's asked about him and he says this.
Do you think he's still a man for the job?
Well, we're going to find out, and I'll let you know.
So that's interesting, Paul. Trump saying, we'll find out, I'll let you know, right? As if he's the one who makes the decision when Trump's approval rating is at a new low, 34%. Among Republicans, 19% say they're enthusiastic. 19% in his own party. I'm thinking, just making sure we don't have a typo there, because that's pretty stunning, Paul. So does this embolden anyone other than John Cornyn?
I do. I think it does. Yeah. I mean, this is maybe the moment, the summer, where so many Republicans are going to get a spine and stand up to him, but also see the radioactivity of the issues that surround him. And I think there are a couple that just keep coming back that Trump can't get rid of. Iran is obviously one of them. That's become like a sucking chest wound for the entire party. And Epstein is the other one. They want to keep batting it down. But within the Republican base, people are furious about the Iran war. They're furious about Epstein. They're also upset about tariffs. And all these things are dragging down Trump's popularity. Now, I don't think Trump cares about popularity ratings. I don't think he cares about approval ratings. But the Senate Republicans do, and especially down ballot Republicans. They're going to be fighting in primary states for independents, which are always the key group to keep focused on. They do not like this, and I think you're going to see more and more Republicans push back. Murkowski also pushed back this week. Another sign of some hope, not just for Republicans and Democrats, but for all Americans. We want Republicans, especially this summer, to show some spine.
All right. Thank you all very much. Paul, I got to say one correction, though, which is that he cares about approval ratings when they're good. When they're good, they're great. And he talks about them a lot, right? His poll numbers. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate you.
He tells me the left and right are dreams for those without a clue. And when you wake, it's time to grow. And it's not cool to believe in school, but if I can say one thing, I've seen the children of the revolution and the good trouble they can bring. He says the red and blue are dead and independent is an attitude. An island in the sea of rhetoric and I can probably go. He tells me the left and right are dreams for those without a clue. And when you wake, it's time to grow.
Powered by Righteous Media.